Good evening. This is Maestro Cotello with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Greentooth Gorge. Our first player today is NoisyElmo. Noisy is playing as the Apothecary. This is an Imperial Fists Apothecary. And he is a healing commander, not a terribly great fighter, but healing definitely works out in synergy with the other Space Marine units, and it does make him a good commander overall. His opponent is Fear, playing as the Grey Knight Bro Captain. This one, Blood Ravens. The Grey Knight Bro Captain is the leader of the Grey Knights, walking around in Terminator armor, starts out with a big four-sword. He mostly ties things up, and he uses We Are the Hammer to increase his speed and buff his damage as well as that of his allies. So this was a replay that was sent to me. We got Noisy going for a triple scout opening, not terribly uncommon by Noisy standards and not even by the standards of many other players. You can very, very quickly get out these scouts on the field. They only cost 210 requisition, and we see that Noisy already still has a lot of requisition in the bank, and he's probably going to use all that requisition in the bank to get attack squad next, which is generally the Noisy build is for the races that he plays, for most of them. It's 3 of the starting squad, one of the more expensive basic squad, and then getting a suppression team. So for Space Marines, that would be 3 scouts, attack, and a 3 scouts, attack, and a devastator. For Chaos, that would be 3 heretics, a Chaos Space Marine, and a Havoc. And he even does it with Imperial Guard too. So he gets a lot of early map control, a lot of field presence with 4 units, 4 squads out on the field. He still has a squad of tax, giving him a lot of very durable ranged firepower, and still has all the extra ranged firepower coming out of his scouts. I mean, we see that Noisy's doing a lot of map control right here. He's got 2 scout squads, and they're really just running around doing map control. Part of the consequence of this is that sometimes it means that Noisy doesn't get his power farm or his power node down as early, and he's actually not going to put it down because, yeah, he wants to get the Devastator next, which is exactly what he did. Because I saw that he had the requisition to put the power node down, but the reason he didn't was because he also had the power to get out that Devastator, so I knew he was going to start getting that Devastator out first. Now, Noisy's moving around. He's got scouts broken off from his main fighting force to do map control, and he generally has the better end of map control right now. Meanwhile, he's got his tax moving around with his Apothecary, and that's kind of like the standard combination. Usually with Space Marines in 1v1, you often have your tax running around with your hero, especially the Apothecary, since they get a lot of field presence that way. Scouts are off doing map control. And yeah, scouts are off doing map control. So in this case, we have 2 squads off doing map control. This scout squad right here is staying in the garrison as a way of really just denying this capture. So if Fear decides to try to get his natural VP back, he's just going to be taking hits from those scouts in the building. And now if he's doing that with the Stormtroopers, they probably will bleed models. The Bro Captain could probably afford to do it, but that would be a lot of time for the Bro Captain to just spend there capturing that point, and the result will probably be that he will capture the point, then he will have to retreat to base, and then the scouts will just get out of the building and then just recapture the point. So Stormtroopers right now are trying to go for the cap. Now the Stormtroopers do quite a bit more damage than the scouts, but the scouts are getting a huge defensive benefit or bonus by being inside this building. Now, the Stormtroopers actually do get the decap off, and then they just run away, because otherwise they actually will just start losing models. I mean, they're already losing models. And rather than just retreat, Fear is deciding to keep moving the Stormtroopers around, actually use them as map control the way Noisy has been using his scouts as map control. Now, that being said, I'm a little surprised with Noisy. At this point, he's gotten pretty much what his Tier 1 build is probably going to be. I don't think he'll get any more units. He might get some Apothecary War Gears, but I think now could be the time to put down some generators. I could be wrong about that. These are definitely better players than me, and Noisy is generally like one of the geniuses of Dawn of War 2 in that he really understands. I feel like he really understands the game better than most people do, which is part of the reason why I think he can do things that a lot of other people think either can't be done, or he can do it and get away with it when most people would do it and fail with it. And that being said, he proved me wrong. He's actually choosing to get Assault Marines on top of everything that he already has. So he's already getting the 6 squad Tier 1, And the long tier 1 is really Noisy's signature. I think he's known for that better than really any other player. And certainly it's not like nobody else does it, but Noisy very regularly does it. Like, I almost feel like it's rare to see Noisy get less than 5 squads. Tex is certainly a player who does it a bit as well, and in particular, well, he'll often do that with Chaos as well. And both these players play Chaos, they play the Sorcerer, and they will both go for long tier 1s with that hero. Tex also likes to do long tier 1s with Eldar heroes, often getting a lot of Dire Avengers as well as a lot of Guardian weapon teams. And now we see that Noisy's actually putting down his power farm. He still doesn't even have that full power farm. This is so interesting. And I mean, I've seen it so many times. I've seen it actually years ago. The first time I ever watched, one of the first times I ever watched like a replay or a cast, I watched a video of Noisy, or a cast of Noisy, and he got something like 5 squads, triple scouts. And he's been doing this forever, and he regularly does this. And it's interesting compared to if we were talking about, definitely, I feel like if we were watching a lower level game, you would most likely not see something like this. And if you did see something like this in a lower level game, it would probably blow up in that player's face. But there's like I feel like there's so much fighting power here with him having all of these units. He's still got scouts out on the field, and one of the things we'll probably see from Noisy is that after a while, he'll probably stop reinforcing his scout models. Alright, this could actually be very bad news for the Devastator. Interceptors are very, very dangerous against setup teams because they have higher damage than Assault Marines. They teleport very quickly. They can often regenerate their energy, regenerate enough energy, or have their cooldown finish off early enough that they can usually get a second jump. Like, they'll do their first jump to scare off a setup team, and then they'll usually be able to jump again to finish it off in retreat. And the Interceptors are very, very good at killing setup teams on retreat, so much that it can actually be like you almost want to weigh that decision of like, do I really want to get a setup team against Grey Knights? And not that you never should, but to be honest, there are times when I've actually decided not to get a setup team against Grey Knights just because of how dangerous Interceptors are and how much that can result in sunk costs if the Interceptors wipe out the setup team. But we have the Apothecary right here, fighting a bit too much. Now, by himself, he's not really going to be able to fight all these things, but now he's got a ton of support in the favor. He's got all of these scout squads over here. He's got the tac squads as well. I actually feel like he's been running away with this Apothecary while his Apothecary was being overwhelmed, but now I think he should keep his Apothecary in there now that he's got his support, taking the Interceptors down to 1 out of 3 models. There was also a time when I believe he had the Strikes down to 1 out of 3 models. Now, Noisy isn't that much far behind in tech compared to Fear, despite getting that huge tier 1. And I actually feel like Fear didn't put down his generators that quickly either. And that was almost a little surprising. I don't think he really got his generators harassed. He maybe just didn't put down the generators too quickly because he was concerned himself of Noisy going for a big tier 1, getting a lot of field presence that way. And maybe he was concerned that Noisy would just be able to bully Fear around, and then he wouldn't be able to protect his power farm, so he didn't build one because he wasn't sure he would be able to protect it. But I feel like he didn't really get his power attacked much.
We are losing a requisition point to the enemy.
So I feel like he could potentially have a bigger tech lead than he does. Noisy still getting to tier 2. Fear, meanwhile, getting out a Vindicare Assassin. Description is an elite sniper. Vindicare Assassin, still a relatively new unit for the Grey Knights. It is a single entity sniper that fills in the gap of Grey Knights not having any long-range snaring AV. So the Vindicare Assassin, he can load in turbo penetrator rounds into his rifle, and that will do AV damage as well as snare. He can also have just some anti-infantry rounds. I don't remember what the special name is for the anti-infantry rounds, but I believe they do more damage than the turbo penetrator rounds, but just don't really do anything to vehicles. The turbo penetrator rounds are for vehicles, although they will still damage infantry. But at this point, Noisy kind of getting forced off the field a little bit. Map control slightly going back to Fear. Fear is going to get his natural VP back, and part of what Noisy does, he definitely goes for a lot of early game dominance, and that early game dominance, I mean, it's given him a huge VP lead. I also think that's something that's also an anti-Grey Knight thing as well. I think Grey Knights can definitely potentially struggle a little bit in the early game with map control. Tax going out on the field, and now have a Sergeant. We'll see if maybe Noisy plans to get a Stern Guard Veteran upgrade. Right now can't afford that. I don't know if he's getting a squad or some upgrades, but right now Noisy is he's got 6 squads. He's got his Apothecary, and he doesn't even have too many resources. But I think he's definitely been getting a few upgrades. He's actually got advanced targeting on his Devastators to give them Vengeance rounds. We also see that he did not reinforce this Devastator or this Scout Squad, so he's just saving some requisition costs. And he's actually, right now we're seeing him pretty low on requisition, so he's not reinforcing the Devastators, putting them back out on the field, though. So that's also interesting. I think he might be putting out all of his units out on the field to give himself field presence, even though he didn't have the resources to reinforce everything. That's something I feel like certainly myself and probably a lot of other maybe more mid-level players might not do that. Though they won't, they actually won't send out. They'll actually just keep their units in base until they can reinforce all of their models. And I mean, that gives them, that means they'll have more fighting capacity once they actually get out onto the field, but you might actually be giving up field presence for that time. But I like the positioning of the Devastators was actually away from the rest of the group. Right now things are seem like they're going pretty well for Noisy, except for the fact that his Devastators got jumped, and that's actually going to be the end of the Devastators, I think. Oh, wow, they actually just barely managed to get alive. I did not think they were going to make it out alive, especially now with the Interceptors having Furious Intervention, meaning they will do knockback with their teleport, and they actually still came very, very close to killing that Devastator. Now, I think with the Interceptors at this point, now that they have 4 models, they will be doing a knockback with their teleport instead of just teleporting in. It's actually going to be very, very hard to keep that Devastator squad alive. At this point, I think if Noisy wants to keep the Devastators alive, he's going to need to send them out onto the field with all 3 models. Noisy, meanwhile, I missed it. He lost one of his Scout Squads. And we're also seeing a lot of healing effects from the Apothecary, and that's because he got the armor of the Apothecarian. This gives the Apothecary an increased healing aura. He, of course, does have a passive healing aura. And he has a passive healing aura that does not use up any energy. The armor of the Apothecarian gives him the advanced healing ability. It gives him a better healing aura that makes him, that just really gives a lot of area of effect healing around him. It can be a very, very powerful ability. Can make these Space Marine units just incredibly durable. And it can make a Space Marine blob just incredibly scary. So Noisy at this point, now it's interesting, Noisy had that longer build, and this is also something that kind of seems to happen with sometimes with Noisy's build. He gets that early game dominance, and then he often does kind of lose it. And I've seen this before. Sometimes he can finish the game like in 15 minutes, and using that early game dominance, and that's actually a way of winning the game. But it doesn't always work out that way. He's lost a Scout Squad. He's actually put snipers on his remaining ones, which I think is actually a great idea. But now I think things have kind of evened out, except for the fact that Noisy has a significant VP advantage. But combat-wise, or just composition-wise, I feel like they're on relatively even terms now, possibly even in Fear's advantage, now that he's got this Grey Knight Dreadnought out on the field. But that advanced healing aura can just be very, very scary. In part because of just how incredibly well it works out with these already very tanky Space Marine units. Now, I'm not entirely sure how Noisy is going to choose to respond to this. Actually choosing to get a second Devastator. In some ways, that's not terribly surprising. I'd say the main reason that's not terribly... Oh, no, he's going to lose his first Devastator, though. And he does, in fact, lose his first Devastator. So now Noisy not looking like in a very strong position. Devastators, in terms of their AV potential with the las cannon, are a very powerful AV unit. Setup AV in general is usually extremely cost effective, usually more powerful than most sources of AV, while also being cheaper. The main disadvantages, of course, they are a setup team. That means their mobility is limited. They also tend to be a little on the squishy side. But otherwise, they usually have longer range, do more damage, and they snare compared to other sources of AV. Sniper shots actually going in on the Vindicare Assassin. So Noisy actually not really looking that strong at all anymore. About to give up some power to Fear. And Fear actually going for a second Dreadnought. And Noisy is now actually at a point where, despite being the Apothecary, he seems to have no resources. He just has no resources. He's upgrading to get the Thunder and Lightning on the Assault Marines, giving him a Melt-A-Bomb for a snare. That could actually be pretty powerful combined with the las cannon, because that could actually put the Dreadnought in a situation where it actually won't really be able to move much at all. That being said, I missed it again, and Fear lost his Vindicare Assassin. I was wondering what he had said ouch to, and it was because he lost his Vindicare Assassin. And now that Vindicare Assassin actually right over here. So, Noisy rebounding a little bit. Probably it helps that he got that Vindicare Assassin kill. I don't know why his Assault Marines aren't going to capture this point. Maybe he just wants to have his Assault Marines on the field, and then he'll go for a capture on his natural VP with his scouts. He's still got a VP advantage, a significant VP advantage. But his Stern Guard veterans are regularly getting disrupted by the Interceptors. And Noisy is really just getting forced off right here, and we see that second teleport from the Interceptors, teleporting once to disrupt the Stern Guards and the Assault Marines, and then again to disrupt the Devastators. And then right now, these Interceptors are being supported by the Bro Captain with the Mantle of Terra or the Canticle of Absolution. Canticle of Absolution allowing the Grey Knights to regenerate their energy in an area. Very, very powerful when combined with Interceptors. It was something that was almost considered a little too powerful. Definitely too powerful back when the Interceptors did not have a minimum range for their teleport, because then the Interceptors would just teleport in place and repeatedly disrupt, and that was. It was a form of melee countering that was very effective. It was also very creative, but it did turn out to be, I think, a little too good. Noisy, meanwhile, not too happy and not in such a strong position. Fear in Tier 3 with a comfortable amount of resources. Does not have enough resources to actually get something like Paladins or Grey Knight Terminators yet, but he's not too far away. Noisy, meanwhile, going to Tier 3, but not looking too strong on resources. I don't know if he's going to try to go for a nice orbital bombardment, considering he's got over 500 red. If he can get a nice orbital bombardment, he might be able to take out a few Stormtrooper squads, as well as just bleed Fear, take back the map for a little while. But these Interceptors definitely proving to be very, very strong at this point. Now, if we notice, Noisy does have his Sniper Scouts. Interceptors might be one of those things. They might be kind of like... This is a big comparison, or not a big comparison, but it's going to be a little bit of a stretch. But they might be like Banshees in the sense that you really might want to invest in shotguns because of just how oppressive this particular melee unit can be. Like Banshees, I personally believe you really do want to get at least one shotgun, if not two, just because of how oppressive Banshees can be. In this particular case, like for Interceptors, because of how oppressive they can be, it really might be worth your while to get at least one shotgun scout squad, if not more than that. The snipers can certainly be nice for dealing with things like even just bleeding the strike squads, bleeding the stormtroopers. And part of the thing is snipers are really nice, but generally just the shotguns provide more value in the context of this game, or just more necessary. Right here, we actually saw the other grenade go off from Thunder and Lightning. They actually used the blind grenade to blind the units in the building. You hardly ever see that used, and it's not like it even did that much. These Assault Marines are attacking the building, but they really don't do a whole lot. The Sniper Scouts are going to do a little bit more. Sniper units are anti-garrison.
Hostiles.
Now we have infiltrated Sniper Scouts taking shots at the Bro Captain. Bro Captain, meanwhile, actually coming pretty close to dying, but he's got a lot of health regeneration because now he also has the Unending Purge, increasing his health regeneration once his health drops below 50%, and it's well below 50%. Noisy is actually in a lot of trouble right now because now we have Interceptors on top of... No, we have Paladins on top of those Interceptors, and with their teleport, it's really, really hard for a for any kind of setup team to really do anything. So we got a Predator now out on the field, already upgrading to a las cannon, took its first shot against the Paladins, took out a nice chunk of their health. And this Predator is, I think, going to be one of the best sources of damage that Noisy is going to get against something like the Paladins once it has the las cannon. Right now he's getting a little overwhelmed, though, and he can't afford to get too close to that Grey Knight Dreadnought. He's now got to back off a little bit. And Noisy is actually pretty much at this point, he's been backing off. He had early game dominance, but he has not had mid game dominance, or maybe he had mid game dominance for a little bit. Definitely does not have late game dominance. And right now I'd say we're in the late game with both players in tier 3. The Predator right now, the Predator was tanks were traditionally something that Grey Knight struggled with. That's not quite as true as it used to be now that we have a Vindicare Assassin. Vindicare Assassin is now building. He's getting another one to help himself deal with that Predator. Otherwise, the Predator would be able to kite a bit and generally stay away from most of the Grey Knight units. Although I also feel like with as many units as Fear has, he could still be very oppressive and push forward. The Predator, although a good source of damage overall against the Paladins, it's still... In some ways, I still wouldn't consider it an overwhelming source of damage. I mean, the damage is still certainly good. And without targeting anything there, it actually targeted the Paladins rather than the Grey Knight Dreadnought. And now we have the Vindicare Assassin again. Vindicare Assassin probably going to hit the Predator with a Turbo Penetrator shot. And then I was going to say, are we going to have Paladins teleport forward to go for the Predator? Alright, Predator now getting repairs. Noisy, I almost feel like he might want to get the reinforced armor plating or the extra armor for the Predator. Assault Marines meanwhile jump in, and that is an orbital bombardment from Noisy, and it looks like it's mostly missing things. Unfortunately, not such a great orbital. Manages to mostly miss. Caught a few units in there, but it mostly caught tougher units that are not going to get wiped and are not going to be too scared of that. I think the higher value with something like an orbital bombardment is actually taking out units like the Stormtroopers, which can actually get wiped. Nevertheless, that orbital bombardment definitely still helping Fear out a lot, or it's helping Noisy out, and it's hurting Fear. We now have the Grey Knight Dreadnought in a little bit of trouble. I think it's finally going to get out of range of the las cannon, the Devastator las cannon at least. And now we have all these units still having to back up a little bit, with Fear pushing forward with the Grey Knights as well as the Interceptors. Predator has been hit by a crack grenade, so now it's both at low health and it also was snared. And that can definitely lead to some follow-up with the Paladins, although they weren't able to get it in that particular occasion. I think Noisy backing up his Predator very, very quickly, just making sure to keep it alive. He knows that Fear has things that can take out that Predator. I mean, that Predator is not exactly uncountered, and I mean, Noisy's mainly going to be relying on keeping it back, being conservative with it, and moving it back at the right times to keep it alive. Now, he hasn't chosen to get extra armor yet. Maybe he's going to go for another Predator. That could actually be pretty effective. Grey Knight Dreadnought now getting chased down by some Stern Guard veterans, trying to shoot vengeance rounds, doing some damage, but now they ran into the support. And that's actually going to be it for the Grey Knight Dreadnought. Stern Guard veterans should even turn around, but just one more Predator shot takes it. Problem is, now we have a Vindicare Assassin shooting those Turbo Penetrator rounds. Only one more hit is going to take out the Predator, and now he stopped moving it. I think the The Vindicator Assassin is going to get that last hit off. The Predator needs to keep going, and it gets hit. Yeah, unfortunately, I think the Predator really just needed to keep moving back on that occasion to get out of there. And unfortunately, Noisy lost that Predator. Now, I don't know if maybe he's going to buy another one. He does have the resources to do that. I don't know if he'll opt to get like a Land Raider or something instead. Although I feel like the Land Raider might actually be more vulnerable to the Paladins. Meanwhile, over here, we have Strike Squad going for a decap on Noisy's power. Fear may have lost track of these because he's actually going to lose the Strike Squad, which I don't know if that's worth it. Now, as long as Noisy's Assault Space Marines are here, they might want to capture this point because there's not a lot of time left, and Noisy is actually having trouble winning in the middle, except for the fact that he now has Terminators. Now, I actually think it can be a pretty good choice to get these Terminators as opposed to getting like a Land Raider or a Predator. One of the good things about the Terminators is that they actually will synergize well with the Apothecary because he can heal them. However, I think they will still be losing to the Paladins. He has to be very careful about the Paladins because those Paladins will beat them in melee, and the Terminators will not actually be doing that much damage in ranged to the Paladins. And he's actually now just using it, not that he has much choice. He's actually running out of options. And now this is actually an orbital bombardment, I think, from, yeah, this is an orbital bombardment from Fear. Oh, and Fear actually managed to catch them very nicely, but we have Noisy activating Angels of Death to try to reduce the damage he's taking. Still, definitely, I think that might still be winning the game in Fear's favor, or at least buying him more time, because it's the double cap in favor of Fear. Noisy needs to get a capture. I think he's going to run this Lone Scout Sniper over to Fear's natural VP. But he's actually going for the power at a time when that's not going to win him the game, and I think that's actually going to be hit for him. One Terminator has fallen, and so has another one. The Terminator squad is down. You see the Paladins now going for the Sniper Scouts, and this is inevitably a game in favor of Fear.
We have failed.
We have failed. Alright. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.